We are up to tip number 5 in my list of things that you must do to become an amazing guitar player. Tip number 5 is you must learn to improvise lead guitar. You need to be able to listen to a chord progression and create your own lead on the fly. And that's not as magical as it may sound. You're actually just taking pieces that you've practiced endlessly and arranging them in a new, original, somewhat spontaneous composition. In the mid-70s, Pat Travers was one of the top guitar heroes. I remember an interview he gave way back then. He said the band's set list was complete with note-for-note memorized leads. So even on a bad night, he had no problem delivering a professional performance. But on the great nights, he could improvise and always had the safety of a memorized lead to fall back on if necessary. As you build your song list, you'll find that the most difficult part of playing cover material is duplicating the lead guitar parts. That's where improvising comes in really handy. Initially, learn to do your own thing. Improvise the complete lead. And then over time, you can start throwing in a few signature riffs from the original recording to sound like the actual lead. Now, we've all been to concerts and even heard the original artist playing a lead that was virtually unrecognizable. That's possibly because they had never played the recorded lead from beginning to end, even in the original recording session. The lead in Comfortably Numb is often credited as being the greatest rock guitar lead of all time. What you may not know is the original recording was actually a composite of several takes. David Gilmour has described this session like this. He ran through the lead several times, recording each take on a different track. Then he spent time listening to each of the tracks. After the recording was completed, he listened to each take and made notes about which were the best parts. For the final mix, he knew which faders to move and what was being played on each track. So what is arguably the best lead of all time was a composite and not actually played from beginning to end in the original recording. It was patched together from a series of improvisations. Learning to improvise lead guitar begins with mastering scales. The next step is memorize guitar licks borrowed from other players. Add to that sequences and arpeggios, and you have the recipe for spontaneous lead improvisations. You can learn to improvise lead guitar just as you've learned other skills associated with guitar. You get better with practice. Spend some time this week improvising leads over rhythm tracks. It will make your hour of practice time fly by and make you feel more like an artist than a practicing musician. Put on the track, turn down the lights, and get lost in your music. Let's begin the lesson. Exercise 1 is called Never Too Late. Use the backing track to this one to practice improvising lead guitar. Play all 5 patterns of the A minor pentatonic scale over this backing track. This one is really straightforward. You'll be able to use the A minor bar chord to play along with the open E minor and C. In the 7th measure, and that's not counting the intro measure, the last 2 chords are simply the C major moving up the neck with the 1st and 3rd strings remaining open. I know that sounds complicated, but just play the C major chord like this and leave the 3rd string open as it is now and the 1st string open, and just move it up like this. And it sounds very pretty. Now, this is an interesting technique for composing acoustic music. You can take this and just move it up like this. Just leave the 1st and 3rd string open, and it's surprising the things you can come up with. Now, what is the name of this chord? I have no idea. I just, when I was composing it, I went. Sounds cool. Don't know the name of it. Don't see any need in looking up the name of it because it doesn't make any difference. You could do this to other chords too, like E major. Here's exercise 1, never too late. Exercise 2 is a fun riff. It has a definite pop feel to it. Honestly, it's a little lightweight, but so what? It's fun to play, and we haven't done anything quite like it to this point. This shouldn't take you any time at all to master. Here's exercise 2 with the animated tab. It's called Riff On. I have discussed briefly many times since the beginning of the course string muting. And it's a process for deadening strings that you don't want to sound. Of course, you can also use it to make your guitar sound kind of heavy with palm muting, but I'm referring to a different type of muting now. You want to deaden the strings that aren't being played. And it doesn't matter if you're playing a lick, lead or rhythm track, you don't want open strings to ring while you're playing other things. What ends up happening is, especially if you're playing loud, the open strings will start vibrating. They'll sound louder through your amplifier, which makes them vibrate even more, and it spins out of control, and this is called a feedback loop. You want to avoid that. Not only that, but when you're playing, you want everything to sound clean. You only want to hear the notes that you're playing and not clunks and, you know, all kinds of other stuff. You just want the lick that you're playing to sound and no additional strings. And the same is true with chords. I've talked about playing a C chord and muting the 6th string with my thumb here. That's one of the techniques. Or playing a D and muting the 6th and 5th string. What I'm going to explain here is pick hand muting. The technique is the same on all of the strings. Here's basically what it is. We'll start with the 6th string. I'm playing the 6th string, and you might notice just naturally I grab the rest of the strings with my left hand. But when you're playing the 6th string, with your right hand, lightly rest your palm on the 5th through the 1st string. That way nothing else will sound. And then this right here is redundant muting. I'm really making sure it's not going to sound when I'm using both hands like that. And it's primarily necessary for the 6th string. So the technique really starts coming into effect on the 5th string. Now I am resting my palm on the 6th string and I'm grabbing the other strings with my fingers. So the only string that is sounding right now is the 5th string, deadened with my palm and my fingers here. Okay? And that's basically the technique. So on the 4th string, I am deadening the 5th and 6th string with my palm and grabbing the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st strings with my fingers. So you're only hearing the 4th string. I will do other things like, let's say I'm sustaining something on the 3rd string. I will actually grab around the 3rd string with my fingers like that. And that makes sure that the 2nd and 4th strings don't sound while I'm doing something like that, a radical vibrato. One other thing that I'll mention here is left hand muting. Now, we're not going to get into that at length right now, but there are techniques that I use, like if I'm playing a scale. One of the ways that I keep it clean is, as I'm playing this note on the 5th string, or these notes on the 5th strings, my fingers are actually lying across the 4th string to deaden them. When I go to the 4th string, they're deadening the 3rd string, and so on. So my left hand is doing some muting too. This is a little complex. I don't expect you to practice it a great deal at this point, but I want you to be aware of the technique. So as I'm going through my scale, I'm actually deadening the higher string under each note. And that keeps everything sounding clean. Also, as I'm doing that, I am actually using some palm muting with my right hand to deaden the lower strings. Don't stress out on this stuff. I want it to be something that you are aware of, you think about, you use it in your own technique, but gradually work your way into it. Just a little side story. I mean, this is how, I don't know, it's something that you end up doing subconsciously. I'll put it that way. For years, I never even knew that I was doing anything with my left hand. I thought it was all right hand muting. As a matter of fact, if you studied earlier versions of the course, everything I talked about was muting with the right hand. I didn't know that I did something with the left hand until I was recording a Michelangelo Badio video. I'm watching him describe everything, and he says, I do all of my muting with my left hand. And I went, whoa, what am I missing? And as it turns out, it's something that I do too, but I'm not even thinking about it when I do it. So this is something that you're going to learn how to do, how to implement over time. It will come with practice. Right now, don't stress over it, but be aware of it when your stuff sounds kind of sloppy. This is the way to clean it up, and clean it up a lick at a time. Don't try to go through your whole repertoire and put muting in everything. It just takes time and practice, but you will get it. For exercise 3, I must make a confession. I'm recording the animated tab along with the picking and fretting hand during a separate session. I almost always know what the exercise is before recording the lesson. Today is different. My buddy DJ was going to record a backing track yesterday and couldn't because of other obligations, so I don't have an exercise 3 yet. Great art isn't created by an unlimited palette of choices. It's always best to define limitations. Like Leonardo da Vinci, when he began to create the Mona Lisa, was probably thinking about a mysterious smile. Well, before writing this track, I'm setting a few parameters of my own. It's week 13, and I haven't done anything with really heavy double kick drum. I'll do that. Many of my students are middle-aged guys locked in their bedrooms, staying away from family and family obligations as they tirelessly practice the exercises in this course. I want your family to walk by your bedroom door and wonder what the is going on in there. When someone opens the door to see what is going on in there, then crank up your amplifier and rage on. next week.